1975. So many sensational events, but none more dramatic than this. Helicopters airlift the last evacuees off the American embassy roof, just barely ahead of the advancing communist army. The climax of the year's biggest story. The collapse in South Vietnam began in March when the government ordered the withdrawal from the Central Highlands. The retreat became a rout, and the rout became blind panic as troops fled before the communist armies. In Vietnam cities, scenes of unbelievable chaos and desperation. Every man for himself, as soldiers and civilians alike fought to get aboard the last ship to leave. One of the uglier scenes was this airport, where South Vietnamese troops pushed women and children aside to claim the last transport plane for themselves. So desperate was the panic that the aircraft took off under fire from those who failed to get aboard, and with people still clinging to the wheels. As the flight from Saigon began, red tape was ignored to allow 2,000 war orphans to leave on special mercy flights to America and Europe. But hopes for a new life for 140 children were cruelly shattered when their plane crashed shortly after takeoff. With total defeat staring him in the face, President Thieu resigned and left the country, literally accusing the Americans of abandoning Vietnam. General Minh was sworn in as the South's last president, the only man acceptable to the communists. In the last week of April, the final battle of the war at Newport Bridge on the outskirts of the capital. The Vietnamese suffered heavy casualties for a cause already lost. As the battle raged, panic swept Saigon. Hundreds of people tried to claw their way over the wall into the American embassy compound, hoping to be picked up by one of the many helicopters now shuttling back and forth to the American fleet in the South China Sea. On board the ships, the scene was fantastic. Helicopters queued up with light aircraft as Vietnamese pilots used anything that could fly to make their way from the mainland. Among the refugees, former Vice President Key. To make more room on the flight decks, helicopters were pushed over the side in the last crazy expense in a $200 billion war. Back in Saigon, law and order broke down as people with no hope of evacuation consoled themselves by looting American stores. "5 hours after the last helicopter had left, the first communist columns entered Saigon. North Vietnamese tanks are flying the Viet Cong flag. They trundled into the grounds of the presidential palace, where General Minh calmly surrendered his country in a simple ceremony. All day the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese, for so long the faceless enemy, marched through the streets of the capital. In the next few days, monuments of the old regime were torn down, and Saigon's markets got a new look. Communist flags and posters of Ho Chi Minh appeared among the vegetables. For Hanoi, it was Minh's prophecy come true. It was the same story in the rest of Southeast Asia. Cambodia had surrendered 2 weeks earlier. As in Vietnam, those who conducted the war left before the end of it. President Long Nau flew into exile via Thailand.